He was only a teenager, full of dreams, laughter, and the kind of hope every parent holds close. But one ordinary evening, that hope was shattered. A single encounter on a quiet street turned into a nightmare that no family should ever endure. He wasn't armed. He wasn't a threat. He was just a son, a friend, a life that mattered. Yet in the eyes of someone blinded by hate, his very existence was enough to spark violence. In a split second, choices were made that would ignite anger, heartbreak, and a battle for justice far beyond one neighborhood. What happened in those next moments didn't just alter one family's future. It lit a fire that would shake an entire community. And as the truth unfolded, the question was no longer just, why did this happen? But how many more times will it be allowed to happen? This is where his story begins, and where silence ends. It was a day like any other. The sun dipped low across the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of gold and red, as Marcus packed up his books and sports gear. At just 16, he carried the weight of discipline and determination that came from being the son of a Navy SEAL. His father had taught him the values of strength, respect, and perseverance, lessons he lived by every single day. To his teachers, Marcus was a leader. To his friends, he was the one they could count on. To his family, he was everything. He dreamed of one day following in his father's footsteps, serving his country, proving that discipline and honor could rise above prejudice. But for now, his world was still filled with school, basketball practice, and late-night study sessions. Nothing extraordinary, nothing dangerous, just the normal life of a young man with a bright future ahead of him. Yet beneath the surface of his town, a tension simmered. Whispers of bias, quiet acts of discrimination, things Marcus had learned to ignore, always lingered in the background. His father had warned him, "The uniform I wear protects me, but it won't protect you from the color of your skin." Marcus nodded when he heard it, never imagining those words would prove true so soon. That evening, as Marcus left practice and walked home along the same streets he knew so well, a sense of calm wrapped around him. He had no idea that someone else was watching. No idea that a decision, reckless and fueled by hate, was about to strike at the heart of his family. Because in just moments, Marcus's ordinary walk home would become the beginning of a tragedy that no one could ignore. Marcus's sneakers scraped lightly against the sidewalk as he adjusted his backpack, the cool evening air carrying the faint sounds of traffic in the distance. He thought of home, of his mother's cooking, his father's stories, the laughter waiting inside those walls. But behind him, a different sound began to echo. Heavy tires rolling slowly, headlights sweeping over his shoulders. A patrol car. At first, Marcus ignored it. Cops drove these streets all the time. But when the car slowed, crawling at his pace, unease prickled his skin. He quickened his step. So did the car. Then came the blinding flash of red and blue lights. The night was no longer quiet. "Stop right there!" The officer's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. Marcus froze, his heart hammering. He had done nothing. No crime, no reason. But every story his father ever told him screamed in his mind. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden moves. Don't argue, survive. The officer stepped out, hand already resting on his holster. His eyes didn't see a teenager walking home from practice. They saw a target. "What are you doing out here? Where are you headed?" The questions came like accusations, not concern. Marcus stammered, "Just heading home, sir." "From school." His voice cracked, but the officer didn't soften. Instead, suspicion deepened. He demanded ID, rummaged through Marcus's bag, every movement laced with hostility. Passers-by glanced, but no one stopped. No one dared. Minutes felt like hours. Then a second officer arrived. 2 against 1. Their tone shifted from questions to commands. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus obeyed, palms trembling in the harsh light. His chest burned with the weight of fear. And something else. Anger. Why was being young and black enough to make him a suspect? Why was his word not enough? The situation escalated. One officer muttered something about looking like a suspect. The other nodded, hand inching closer to his weapon. Marcus's breath quickened. He raised his hands higher, his voice breaking as he pleaded, "Please, I'm not who you think I am." But reason had already left the scene. Then, the moment that changed everything. A sharp movement, a sudden shout, and the crack of a gunshot tearing through the night. Marcus stumbled, pain searing through his body, his vision blurring as the world tilted sideways. Silence followed. For a second, even the sirens seemed far away. The officers looked down at what they had done, not with regret, but with the cold, rehearsed detachment of men who believed they would never face consequences. As Marcus lay on the ground, fighting for breath, his thoughts weren't of himself, but of his father, the man who had trained him, guided him, promised him that discipline and honor mattered. Would his father find him like this? Would he believe his son had tried to be strong? The scene drew a crowd now, phones recording, voices shouting, a story unfolding that could no longer be hidden. The officers barked orders to push people back, but the cameras stayed. The truth was caught in every frame, every tear, every scream for justice. And miles away, a decorated Navy SEAL was about to get the call no parent should ever receive. The call that would set in motion a chain of events neither the officers nor the town could ever prepare for. Because this wasn't the end of Marcus's story. It was only the beginning of a reckoning. The call reached his father within minutes. A decorated Navy SEAL, trained for war zones, now stood trembling in the quiet of his living room as the words pierced through the phone. "Your son's been shot." For a man who had faced the horrors of battle, nothing prepared him for the terror of losing his own child, not in combat, not on foreign soil, but on the streets of his own country. By the time he reached the scene, the flashing lights painted the pavement red and blue, but the sight of his boy lying motionless on the ground eclipsed everything else. His knees buckled, fury colliding with heartbreak as officers tried to hold him back. This wasn't just another father's grief. This was the rage of a soldier who had given his life to defend a nation that had failed to defend his son. Witnesses shouted, phones recorded, but the officers stood firm, shields of authority protecting them from accountability. His father's voice thundered through the chaos. "He was my son! He was just a boy!" The words tore into the night, each one a blade of anguish cutting through the silence of those who watched. And then the shift. Not in the crowd, not in the officers, but in the distance. Headlights, engines, the low rumble of vehicles approaching. Special forces, his father's brothers in arms, men who had served beside him in deserts and mountains, now standing shoulder to shoulder on American soil. They didn't come for war. They came for truth. As the line of soldiers advanced, the crowd parted. The officers who had pulled the trigger now found themselves surrounded. Not by civilians, but by trained warriors who knew the cost of sacrifice and the value of life. For the first time, the power shifted. The fear was no longer on the faces of the innocent. It was etched into the men who thought they could act without consequence. The night held its breath. Sirens wailed. Cameras rolled. And at the center of it all lay Marcus, caught between life and death, his story teetering on the edge of becoming a symbol that would ignite a nation. Because in that moment, one question burned hotter than any spotlight. Would justice finally rise, or would silence bury the truth once again? Marcus survived the night, but survival came at a cost no child should ever pay. His body carried the scars of the bullet, but his soul carried something far heavier. The memory of being seen not as a student, a son, or a dreamer, but as a threat. His father stood by his side in the hospital, torn between gratitude that his boy was alive and fury that such a wound had been carved by the very people sworn to protect him. The officers faced investigations, hearings, and headlines. Yet as the days turned into weeks, the story became less about them and more about what Marcus represented. His pain was not isolated. It was a reflection of countless names and countless families who had faced the same injustice, too often without the cameras to capture it. Communities rallied, voices rose, and Marcus's story spread far beyond the town where it began. For many, he became a reminder of how fragile safety is when skin color is treated like a crime. For his father, it became a mission to turn personal tragedy into a call for accountability, to ensure that no other parent would stand in his place, watching their child's future stolen by prejudice. But the truth is, Marcus's story is not just his. It is the story of a system that still fails to see Black lives as equal, of a nation still wrestling with its promises of freedom and justice. And until that changes, no family is truly safe. So the question lingers long after the lights fade and the voices quiet. How many more Marcuses will there be before we decide that enough is truly enough? This is not just his story, it is ours. And what we choose to do next will define what kind of nation we become.